Hi friends, I'm Kim Adamski, HIV prevention specialist at the Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective. We're located at 1841 Broad Street in Hartford. We do STD testing, dental, we have support groups, we have education. If you want to give us a call for any kind of an appointment, our number is 860-278-4163. So today we are starting a live virtual discussion series on LGBTQ folks' experiences, with religion. So we're featuring different folks from the religious community in and around Hartford to talk about their personal experiences. Today we have Reverend Aaron Miller from the Metropolitan Community Church of Hartford. And we're very excited to have you. The Metropolitan Community Church of Hartford is located down near, if you're familiar, near the Candy Cane Building, Charter Oak, that area. And so, Aaron, can you introduce yourself and MCC?
Sure. It's good to be with you, and thank you so much for the invitation tonight. I'm Reverend Aaron Miller. I'm the pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church of Hartford, and I've been doing that for the last 10 years. Before that, I was a corporate manager in global logistics. And so I've been involved with the world now as a spiritual thing, but before as a logistics manager of aftermarket automotive products that I shipped around the world. So it's good to be with you. I've also been a chaplain at Yale New Haven Hospital for 10 years. And I do a lot of training around this subject, around welcome and inclusion in various settings and all. So it's wonderful to be here. And the other thing I would say about MCC, and you may not know about Metropolitan Community Churches, but we're not that old. We're only 53. And so we were started in 1968. We were started about 6 months before the Stonewall riots. And we were started by a defrocked Pentecostal minister who was told to go into the pulpit and say he was homosexual, and then he was asked to leave the church. And he went through a very dark period and then felt this calling that it was time to start a church for those who were not welcome in their churches either. And so that was started back in 1968, as I say, and we're now in 40 countries around the world and leading pride parades and starting churches in places where, frankly, homosexuality is criminalized. So we're doing a lot of work around forwarding or leading in the progressive thought and theology around God's love. So MCC is, and MCC Hartford is only 5 years younger than that. So we've been around for 47 years now, going on 48. So
Awesome. That's a while. You say that's young, but I mean, that's an establishment in the city, longer than I've been here.
I know, and you know that the Hartford Collective was answering the phone in MCC Hartford?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, there's been a connection between the collective and MCC Hartford since your beginning. And I guess you moved out, the way the story goes, Linda can tell you. You moved out and you got your own place, but you started with MCC Hartford.
Very cool. Good to know. History of my own organization. So, question: did you grow up with a religion, and what was that like for you? I think you just touched on that briefly. I may be wrong. But.
Well, my mother's Jewish, my father Protestant, and so I was raised actually in a congregational. I was baptized in a congregational church. I was confirmed in a Lutheran church. My mother was baptized actually with me when she converted to Christianity. And I left the church for quite some years after that and came back to MCC, was my return to the church so many years later.
Okay, all right. That's a kind of a change right there. Still pretty, as far as I know, the Congregational Church is a pretty open and accepting church, relatively speaking.
I was very young then. My experience in early church was very gendered.
Okay.
Very strictly gendered and constraining.
Mm-hmm.
You know, also very structured in its theology, and you had the same service every week, of course.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was raised Catholic, so we always saw the Congregational Church as kind of liberal, but I mean, I guess it depends on what direction you're coming from. So at what point did you realize that you were LGBTQ, and how did that affect your faith?
Well, I knew I was different. And I think that's something people say a lot. I knew I was different, but there wasn't any language around that back then. So for most of the years, this being different, and there's certainly the word transgender did not happen until quite not many years ago. As far as really being in the public sphere and being
Mhm.
talked about and that sort of thing. So I would say I was different, but I discovered that how I was different so many years later. I came out as gay initially when I was 19, because when I came out, or when I investigated what it would take to transition, they told me it would take a long time and a lot of money, and so I decided that just staying in the gay community was the better option for me.
Mhm.
But I transitioned 13 years ago. And it really was a matter of faith, by the way, that I was called to transition. So, because what was very clear to me was that God made very clear to me was that I could continue the two lives I was living, but I could not minister in God's name if I wasn't authentically who I was or who I am.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I hear what you're saying, and that's great that you were able to reconcile those two things.
So let me just say one more thing, that faith wasn't something that it was religion up until
Okay, yeah.
it's okay.
So I
Uh,
hear what you're saying. Can you explain what you
yeah.
feel is the difference?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I came to faith many years later, and actually through Divinity School. I would say that I actually came to a strong faith.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying there. So it doesn't sound like you always knew you wanted to be a pastor since you were working in like managerial stuff, right?
So I never, I don't know, I laugh when I say this, and people that know me laugh too. I never wanted to be a pastor. That was never why I went to Divinity School, and it was never on my radar. It was on God's radar, but not mine. I wanted to be a chaplain, and so I went to Divinity School to become a chaplain.
Mhm.
And what I didn't realize is that wasn't the way to go there or to get there. And so God kind of withheld that from me for those years. I finished Divinity School, I was ordained, and then as an ordained pastor, I could become a chaplain. So I actually ended up being both. So I think
Okay.
I made room for both callings.
All right. So I don't know the difference between a pastor and a chaplain. So
Okay.
you might want to tell me as well as maybe anybody who's watching.
Sure. So a chaplain, it's the same kind of care, spiritual care that you're offering someone, but in a chaplaincy setting, in my case, it was in a hospital setting, but chaplaincy is typically a very short relationship. You're going into somebody's room for a day or two, but you don't have a long-term relationship.
Mhm.
And pastoring is different. It's everything, as they say, from cradle to grave, right? It's everything that happens between the time you're born and the time you die, that you're providing spiritual and pastoral care on the journey.
Okay, yeah. I kind of think of when I hear about the word chaplain, I think of when I used to work in prison, folks that were having spiritual issues would see the chaplain then, but not like I hadn't really thought of them in a hospital, but I know I've heard the association before. So
Well, in those settings, it's quite common for someone to come to faith, or to come to a crisis of faith,
mm,
or need faith in order to get through whatever it is they're facing. And
mhm.
certainly when you're in a hospital, it is a crisis,
Oh,
a
of
health
course.
crisis, right?
Yeah, nobody's there because they want to be. So what made you specifically interested in MCC?
So how I got to pastor, all right, is probably helping to answer that too.
Yeah.
I have a very good friend that I've had a friendship with for as long as MCC has been around, MCC Hartford. And she asked if I would come and be the interim pastor while after a pastor had left. And so my skill set in business was a perfect match, because it's helping organizations and churches are like this too, mission and vision, right? To see who they are and what they're called by God to do. So I went there, and I have to tell you, I think this is true for the congregation, but it's certainly true for me, that I fell in love. okay, from the moment I went there. It's a wonderful congregation. But why MCC? And also that brought me to this place of faith. At the same time, or as I entered Divinity School, a little bit before that, I was going and attending MCC. MCC is a very different kind of church. You know, again, I said about social justice. Social justice and ministry are really quite balanced at MCCs. But MCC is not just hanging flags. There's nothing wrong with that. We hang lots of flags, but we affirm, and we more than affirm and welcome. We celebrate who you are. And so you're not coming into a church looking around saying, is there anybody like me? You're going in saying, everybody's like me, or some variation of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I know I'm going to be at home, and I am going to be welcome. And so that comfort level and that hospitality is there right from the beginning.
Yeah, I know the difference between accepting and affirming are really important, because accepting is just saying, like, I'll tolerate you, you're fine. Affirming is saying, I like you, like, your identity is valid. But I really like that you say celebrating.
Yeah.
That's really nice. I mean, I like that, and I'm going to use that. All right. So what kind of education? I mean, you said you went to Divinity School. What was that like? And did you encounter any hurdles because of being LGBTQ?
I went to Divinity School before I transitioned.
Okay.
So the difficulty I had was around the fact that I went through Divinity School not as me. Okay. And so I kept to myself, and that's the thing. Divinity School, like anywhere else and any school, is if you don't see, and as I said, even about churches, if you don't see people like you, it's very isolating. And so I felt very isolated being who I was, different from the people that I went to school with. But it wasn't, I mean, Yale Divinity School is very welcoming. I just didn't feel able to be myself during that experience. And it was right afterwards, after I graduated, that I started, after graduation ordination, I began to transition. And so I went back, and I simply, for the ordination, and also with MCC, I was ordained as before transition. So I had to go back and get the paper, and it really was a paperwork change for both Yale Divinity School and for MCC. And so my transition was rather uneventful from that standpoint. Okay.
All right.
So I also did my undergraduate at, so I just throw this in, did my undergraduate at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield. So that was a Catholic university, which is really interesting because, you know, Catholic tends to be more, you know, structured, and perhaps, you know, I might have felt more constrained there, but I ended up the only one graduating with a religious major.
Wow.
Yes,
that's definitely unexpected.
Yeah, from a Catholic university. Interesting.
So like you said, MCC is an LGBTQ affirming or celebrating church. But I mean, you know, there's always room for improvement everywhere. We all need to get better all the time, myself included, Health Collective included. So what's MCC working on right now to become more affirming of LGBTQ plus, folks and other minorities?
Well, I would say that what we're most challenged with is staying up with the ever-changing terminology. Okay, I know you're laughing because I know you do that. You're trying to do that too. And it's like, we are every day changing terminology and understanding of who we are, what we feel, and identifying ourselves. And it's calling for new terminology, new definitions, and with that to stay current and welcoming with that. Okay, you know, like pronouns are changing all the time. You know, we you know that too. It's like we're changing pronouns, we're changing descriptors, we're changing all of that. I would say that's probably our greatest challenge. But our also greatest challenge, the other great challenge we have, is that we are a church that has many differences. We are an unusual church in that we are spiritually oriented. And with that, and because we're LGBTQ plus, that's who we are. That's typically what draws people to us, is the freedom to be who we are as we experience our spirituality, and recognize our religious, our religious history or our how we've come up. But in our church, we have all different religions. We have no religion. We have agnostics, atheists, Hindu. We have Jewish folks. We have people across the spectrum, Catholic, Protestant, across all the spectrum. So our great challenge, and across racial differences, across gender, across sexuality. So our great challenge is to be able to encourage, well, to welcome, right? And to encourage people to bring their whole selves, whatever that is, and make sure that people are experiencing, right? And are engaged and feel welcome across any difference that may present. Because we really are a congregation of all differences.
Great. So outside of services, you talked a lot about diversity and inclusion, not just for the LGBTQ community, but for different races, different religions. So what does MCC do in the community to promote social justice, anti-discrimination, volunteering, stuff like that?
Well, I would say that if you say social justice, look around you, you'll see us. Okay. Because it's really in our heart. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if there's an injustice happening, we're standing, we're marching, we're vocal, we're speaking out against. So, but for actual things that we do, we're involved in many, many things. And before COVID, of course, many more.
Yeah.
Right?
Same.
It's really kept us all from being as active and as engaged as we had before. But we've been involved in supporting a homeless shelter. Actually, well, the one right behind us. We're involved with You in the Prom. We are involved with the Hartford mayor's office and a couple of LGBTQ projects that are happening in the city for youth as well as adults. We are the host of the TDOR, the Transgender Day of Remembrance, every year. We've been doing that for 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. And we do that for the community. So everyone is welcome to come in, and we've marched for that as well. We think we've also walked against hunger with Hands on Hartford. We support a church, a new church in South Africa, as well as in Colombia. So there's social justice in the world that's happening from MCC Hartford. So, and again, as I said earlier, I see the world as the world. That ministry really is in every place. And we are all God's children and all God's beloved. And frankly, the thing that's different about MCC is that you are all beloved to us as well. And that's what we seek to do every single day, is to make sure that that's the message, and the good news that we share is that love and that welcome and that hospitality, better and better and better.
That's so awesome that you guys are so active. So I take it, am I going to see some of your folks at the Day of Silence March tomorrow in Blueback?
So I didn't know about that.
It's all over Instagram, but I don't know how much you're on Instagram.
Okay, you got me. I'm busted. Okay.
Oh, it's okay. You can't know everything.
Do send me stuff about that.
Yeah, sure. Just so anybody watching this knows, there is a Day of Silence protest at 6:30 p.m. in Blueback Square. So I think it's mostly run by Power Up, which is in Manchester.
So one of the other things, so I do want to add one more thing, because one of the things that's very, very special to me is that we became a sanctuary church. Mm-hmm. And that was all during this last administration. We marched for immigrant rights and all of that, but there was somebody who was going to be deported. And so we became a sanctuary church to keep her from being deported. She had been here since she was 4 years old. Wow. And the past administration was going to deport her to a place she had never been before, that she recalls. And what we did was, not only did we set up our church as a sanctuary church, and by the way, of all the churches that were asked in Hartford, we're the only one who said yes. And this is a lesbian couple, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but who better to offer that welcome but us? And so we did. And not only that, but we also had our MCC in England prepared should she be deported before we could get her safely in. So we had all of this set up, and that's why social justice is really is a way of life.
Yeah, I love to see that direct action too. Like,
yes,
you could talk about policy all you want, but if you're not helping people on the ground, in the meantime.
That's exactly right.
So in your opinion, what are ways that folks can work in their churches to support LGBTQ folks, regardless of what kind of church they go to?
So that's a lofty question.
Yeah.
I always like to say that there are some very practical and very simple things to do to welcome. You're messaging in all sorts of ways. So you're doing that through your bulletins, you're doing that through your advertisements, you're doing that through pictures, doing through sermons, through your liturgy. How are you using multiple genders in your language? Are you showing multiple sexualities and genders in all the messaging you're doing? So there are ways to you communicate without saying anything, as I said, through pictures and all. So that's one way. Are your policies, your church policies, are they making sure that everyone is welcome and they are protected against discrimination? I know we are in this state, but it's a very different thing when you do that as a church and you say everyone is welcome here. And we make sure in our own church policies that we promote inclusion and diversity and all. Education around it, very intentional. I would say that, once a year or on some regular occasion that you have these conversations and that you bring in education so that people are getting updated terminology, so you stay current and all of that, but also that the people that are hearing it are getting the message that, that we are trying our very best, to welcome everybody. And the other thing too is invite people to raise their voices, ask the questions, open the space, and make it safe, and then listen, deeply listen. And from that listening, create an action plan that engages the people that are raising those concerns to help in moving the church forward in the ways that they need to, in the ways they need.
I think one of the things that is really difficult about being more affirming for anybody is accepting criticism and thinking about it, especially in like a church environment, which is often very rooted in tradition. So that's really great advice. Now I have a question for you to address allies. Do you have any advice for allies to talk to friends or family members who object to LGBTQ folks for religious reasons?
So you can always call me. I just put that out there if you need any help. But for me, it's really there's two simple things that I've used because people have come against me in religious environments, okay? And quite often, frankly, saying whether it's against creation or, it's against God's natural order, many other things are said. But the truth of it is, and the answer to all that is not to quote scripture. I never do that. Actually, what I do is I say, God is love and God loves me. Mm-hmm. And God loves all of us. And so it really kind of shuts down the argument because if it's a religious base that comes at you for allies, and if it's not religious, it's really about, and I had this with my own family. I said, all I've ever wanted, because I love you so much, all I've ever wanted is for you to flourish in your life and to be as happy as you possibly can be. Wouldn't you want that for me?
That's a really good response there. I mean, it's very, very basic, but also like who could argue against that? So.
Yeah. And I always lead with love. So I love you. Wouldn't you and your love for me want the same things?
Yeah. Okay. So does anyone have any questions for Aaron? We've got a couple of people on the call, but it's okay if you don't.
Got a question from Dad.
Oh, there's a question?
From Dad.
Oh.
He's raising his hand.
He's raising, I don't know how I can tell he's raising his hand.
In the picture.
In the picture. Gee, I had it minimized. I couldn't see the picture. I could only see you, Aaron. I only had eyes for you. Dad.
Yeah.
Hi.
What part of the country did MCC originate in?
It started in the United States. It started in Los Angeles. And that minister that I spoke of, his very first service was with 12 people in his living room. And within a month or two, I think he had to find a new place. Well, I think the first offering was like $1,380, and there were 12 people. And quite frankly, as much as it's endearing to me, they were scared the entire time. because they didn't know who was going to show up. They took out an ad in the paper. And in 1968, you put an ad in the paper that all gay folk and LGBTQ folk are welcome to this worship service in his home. And they were frightened. And quite honestly, there have been churches that have been burned.
Yeah.
You know, there have been Black church burnings, and there have been MCC church burnings too.
Yeah. Even places like Health Collective have experienced threats like that, even though they're not associated like with a religion or anything. And unfortunately, it's still a thing that happens, especially in other parts of the country. But it's not like there's not homophobia in the Northeast, like we like to pretend there isn't.
There are corners of this very state.
Oh yeah.
That haven't quite come along yet. They're still working.
Yeah, they're working on it.
Yeah, they're working on it. We're all a work in progress.
Yeah. All right. Mom?
So how large is your congregation and how far does it extend? Is it only Hartford or does it go beyond that?
Well, it is in Hartford. We have an average attendance of somewhere around 30 to 32 people. We are now coast to coast and around the globe because of COVID. So we have South Africa joining us from time to time, Texas, Arizona, California, you know, and so this Zoom, and we do Zoom, we've chosen Zoom for a special reason, because we wanted our church, and why this is so special is it's intimate. And so when we welcome you in, we do welcome you. And we want to know all about you, and we want you to know we love you right from jump. And so we don't live stream. So the people that come, that's why we've done it this way. But we are, like I said, now we're really around the world potentially. And when we go back, we'll have Zoom available as well as a hybrid model. So we bring everybody with us.
Wow. That's great. So what times are your services for anyone who's interested in checking them out?
Okay, we're at 10 o'clock on Sunday. And we have, and we stay after for fellowship. You can come at 9:30. We open the room at 9:30. So if you want to meet us beforehand and say hi and have a little fellowship ahead of time for the early birds. And then afterwards we have fellowship to do the very same thing. We also have a Bible study on Wednesdays, same link, from 7 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday nights. And we don't do Bible study your typical way. As you might have guessed by now, we kind of do everything a little different, okay? So we look at these stories that you hear the same way over all these years, with a very different, radical kind of look, and a queer kind of look sometimes, when the scripture raises itself for that.
Mm-hmm.
But the link is available on our website, and that's mcchartford.com. And if you scroll down on the very first page, you'll not only have the link for that Zoom, which is for both, as I said, and anything we do as far as the church. I'll also give you events that we do as well. But all the way at the bottom is my phone number and my direct email. So if you want to contact me by phone or by email, that's there. If you need prayer, or if you need, some help or support, I'm there.
All right, and I'll drop that link in the description of the recorded video, which will go up on our Facebook page and our YouTube profile. So it looks like we are done on time here, but thank you so much, Aaron, for coming on and kicking off our new series. It was really great to talk to you. Let me just provide our Health Collective's contact info again. Our number is 860-278-4163. My email is kim@hglhc.org if anybody has any questions. And then Aaron, like you said, your email address and phone are open as well. They're on your website, but if you can also just tell people them.
Okay, my phone number is 203-209-1504. My email address is rev as reverend .Aaron Miller, run together, at yahoo.com. But that's also available on the website, as I said. And I was going to say about contacting. you can also, if you'd like to talk with me before joining one of the services, that's what I find quite often. Or if there's some questions, religious questions you want to ask, or you want to get to know me a little bit before you actually join us, I'm available and love to meet you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming live with us, and thanks to those folks who joined us. There will be a recorded version, like I said, up on our Facebook page, Twitter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And next week we will have Michael Reynolds from the Franciscan Center, which is a Catholic church in Hartford, and he is the chair of the LGBTQ outreach ministry there. So I hope we will see you all then. And in the meantime, have a great night. Thanks so much.
All right. God bless. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.